it's only in God that your soul's at rest, as the Psalm would say. I mean, it's only in God that your soul's at rest. And the paradox there is, if God is love, well, it's only in love that your soul's at rest. It's only when you give away. The illusion is, look, I'm unhappy, because everybody's unhappy. It doesn't mean depressed, it means everyone's hungry, right? So the illusion is, well, I just need something I gotta get filled up.
Yeah.
I gotta give pleasure or power or wealth or something, just fill me up. Where the whole trick is always, no, it's not that. It's emptying yourself out. Give away what you have, and then you'll find more grace coming into your life. Because grace, that's what God is. That's God's name. He is love. Love is to will the good of the other. So as you give it away, you get more.
Right. Well, I really noticed this as an academic. I noticed there were two kinds of professors, and graduate students for that matter. There were those who were completely generous with their ideas. My supervisor was like that, Robert Peel. Rob's still alive, and I still work with him. And I'd go speak with Bob on a pretty regular basis, and we'd talk like you and I are talking, and we'd generate like 5 research ideas, and every time we talked, there'd be 5 more. Yeah, and he was never territorial. Right. And he was just a fount of new ideas. Then there were the other kinds of professors who, if they had an idea and shared it with you, they never let you forget who that idea was.
Right, that's
and
my
they would
idea.
Jealously guard them. And what happened to them was, over time, their pool of ideas shrank to nothing.
Yeah, of course.
Partly because other people stopped working with them, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with Bob, the more ideas he gave away, literally, the more ideas he gave away, the more he got.
No, that's the principle. That's the Bible. That's the Bible over and over and over again. And the reason for that is that God is love, and God is this inexhaustible source of grace. And if you get hooked onto that, then you start looking like God. You start acting like God. You start becoming attuned to that. There's the saints. That's why they're radiant. That's why they have halos. They're radiant. Right. They've found something. And that, I've known some saints in my life. I think real saints.
Yeah.
And they make you more alive. That's the mark of a saint, that when you're with them, you're more alive. Because the glory of God is a human being fully alive. So God wants to enliven the other. So when you're hooked onto that, that's what you want too. And you do it, you accomplish it, And then when someone's not a saint, they're the opposite of it, you feel less alive when you've been with them. You feel diminished by them. It's because now you're caught in this game. They're going to hang on to what they've got, make sure you don't get it, no one else gets it.
That's that envious game.
And then so there are people that breathe life into a room and people that suck air out of a room, you know? And you can say there's 2 types of people in the world,
Well, that's the Cain and Abel issue.
Yeah, quite right,
I'm taking 4 of my esteemed colleagues and you across the world.
Oh, wow, this is amazing.
To rediscover the ways our ancient ancestors developed the ideas that shaped modern society.
It was a monument to civic greatness.
To visit the places where history was made.
That is ash from the actual fires when the Babylonians burned Jerusalem from 2,500 years ago.
To walk the same roads.
We are following the path of the crucifixion.
And experience the same wonder.
We are on the site of a miracle.
What kind of resources can human beings bring to a mysterious but knowable universe?
Science, art, politics, all that makes life wonderful.
And something new about the world is revealed.
But trying to get people to that space, there's pastoral ministry if you want. There's the translation of all this theoretical stuff into practice. There's that wonderful story about Jared Manley Hopkins, the great poet. And someone came to him and said, I'm really struggling to believe in God. What should I do? And Hopkins said, give alms. It's a great answer. Like, he didn't give him an argument or he didn't give him theoretical.
Right, practice.
He said, give alms. Yeah, give alms. Give something away.
Right,
and you'll discover something of God in that process.
Right.
I think that's dead right. I think that's dead right.
Right.
So that's where it comes down, and pastorally, is to get people into that space.
Yeah, well, I often recommended to my clients who were depressed and isolated that they do some volunteer work.
Yeah.
Right? Because partly, practically, they needed to be connected to other people, and they needed to see that their contribution would be useful and valuable. That's another thing people aren't taught well to understand, which is that, and this is another form of wealth, is that especially if you're having a hard time and maybe you're torturing yourself to death as a consequence of your knowledge of your inadequacies, to see the positive impact of something you did reflected from someone else is unbelievably revivifying.
Yeah, right.
Right? And so you can imagine if you set up your life so that everywhere you went, that was reflected back because you'd been that generous, fortunate and generous. Right. It's like, well, how could you have a better situation than that, even hypothetically? I think you can think about this in terms of straightforward economic game modeling. So there are these experiments that have been done now. Imagine you have two people. So you play this game with them. You say, okay, well, here's the rule. I'm going to give you $100, and you have to offer some of it to your partner here. If they accept your deal, I'll pay you, and you can split the money. Yeah. If they reject your deal, neither of you get anything. Yeah. Okay, so you play that game. And if you play it with people worldwide, what happens is on average, the person will offer 50%. Now, this has been a revolutionary discovery because the classical economic rationalist view is that the person who's being offered the money, I give you $100, should offer $1 to their partner because they're rational self-maximizers. So they get 99, their partner gets 1, but the partner should take it because, well, do you want $1 or do you want $0? 1 is more than 0. Right. 1 is a better deal than 0. But that isn't how it works. People offer 50%. If you match a rich person and a poor person together, the fact that the poor person is poor does not increase the probability that they will accept a low value offer. In fact, it has the opposite effect. So a poor person is more likely to refuse an unfair deal. And the reason for that is that this shows you how narrow the parameters were of the self that was supposed to be maximized economically. I've often played this with people in a crowd. While you play everything you do, you play to a crowd. Every part of your life, it impacts your reputation. Well, if you develop a reputation as a fair trader, then the number of opportunities you're going to have to trade obviously will grow. Yeah. And so then you might say, well, how do you optimize that? And I suspect that you probably optimize that by slightly erring on the side of the other person with every interaction. Yeah, right? Not too much, because then you can get taken advantage of. But as a rule of thumb, it's like, well, if you get 55 and I get 45, well, that's not so bad, especially if it increases the probability that you'll agree. Right. But then if that increases the probability that more people will play games I'm setting up, well, the net victory in that is immense. Yeah. And so it could easily be that if this was modeled properly mathematically, like as a strategy, and attempts have been made in that direction, that something like default generosity, we know this is default. We know default reciprocity works as a trading strategy across multiple different situations. But I suspect that default generosity is probably an even more effective strategy. Yeah. So you could say it is not some pie in the sky, what would you say, sanctimonious spiritual advice to tell people to give.
It actually works, though.
Oh, yeah, it's the most practical possible advice.
Yeah.